What's up gamers, DreamcastGuy here, reviewing today The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening on Nintendo Switch. In order to properly begin this video, we first need to ask a very vital question, which is, at what point is a remake not a remake? When a game developer actually sits down to try and reinvent their classic, at what point do they accidentally create an all-new game? Now the reason I'm actually asking that is because I'm somebody who grew up playing a lot of Link's Awakening back on my Game Boy. It was actually the first adventure game I played completely by myself, and I used to just run through it again and again, seeing how fast I could solve the puzzles and beat the bosses, and it really kind of dawned on me that this was a very different kind of adventure. It's a Zelda game that doesn't have Zelda, it doesn't have Ganon, it doesn't really have any of the bad guys or the good guys you might think, except for Link himself. It was definitely a little tiny game that was meant to just try and boost the Game Boy's sales, but it gained a lot of love. And when it comes to this, it seems like Nintendo is trying to amplify the assets. They're trying to take the parts of it that definitely work the best and turn them up big time. Now I want to try and talk about why this game is new, but the first thing we really got to dig into is just basically the story itself. So basically, Link is going on a raft, he gets struck by lightning, and he wakes up on this random island, where it seems like everybody is very happy, except for the fact that there's giant monsters roaming all over the place, and of course 8 magical dungeons. It's going to be up to us to try and plumb those dungeons and steal 8 magical instruments that apparently will get us to be able to be free from this island once and for all. Now doing that of course is going to require a million side quests and talking to monkeys and trying to bribe people and of course getting a bunch of different fun gadgets. Now something that made the original version of this very difficult back on Game Boy was that the Game Boy only had 2 buttons. You could move and then you had 2 different attacks, and so because of this you actually had to choose which items you were going to carry. Only a sword and only a shield, or if you were going to do something like the speed boots and a shield. I mean, it basically made it where you really had to try and choose your inventory with precise accuracy for each scenario. Well, something they've decided to do in this modernization of it is you can pretty much use every single item at once. Instead of making it where your shield is an item, it's just the R button. If you want to be able to run fast, you just hold the L button. If you want to actually use any of your special abilities, you can just chart them to any of the face buttons. It definitely makes it where everything is a lot faster and much more accessible. But more than that, I've noticed that it seems like they've tried to make the enemies have a lot more mobility, because in the original version it was very shrunk down. People could only walk up, down, left, and right, whereas here now we have full omnidirectional. People can actually attack you from any direction, and so they'll try and flank you or try and at least to get their shield in your face and try and push you into a corner. It seems like they tried to make everything feel much more fresh, because if they just tried to port the original ideas of this, they would not work in 2019. Now I want to talk a lot about just this graphical style because I think it's so cute. This is definitely very much in the style of the other very flat Zeldas, things like A Link Between Worlds. And I think that it definitely works, but it does have this weird trim around it that does get a little bit annoying at times. It seems like the idea behind this was to have a really artsy filter to make it where it really feels like we're actually peering in on a little tiny diorama come to life. And it works most of the time, but occasionally when I'm doing something like exploring this graveyard, having these weird blurred images all across the sides of the screen, it definitely just makes me wish it was a little bit more crisp. And of course, there are some frame rate issues. It seems like trying to have this super cutesy art style and lots of action going on screen with multiple enemies is going to cause some slowdown. Not to a tremendous degree, but there are definitely certain spots, especially if they have lots of different environmental detail, like lots of grass and destroyable pots and stuff, where things begin to basically get stuttery. There are frame rate problems, but they only really seem to exist on the overworld. When you go into the dungeons, everything runs great, and it's definitely when you begin to notice all the different interesting design to the music. The complete orchestra that's now existing in in this is way better than the original. So something that was always a very key aspect of Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening is actually the tunes themselves. Characters sing. Each of the instruments we collect actually plays its own song when you retrieve it. Being able to actually pull you in with the harmony of the Triforce is a huge aspect of this game, and while it worked in the original version, it is a million times better here. There were actually a couple occasions where I did not want to leave an area because I enjoyed the music so much. There's just so much nice to it that when I'm just sitting there tapping my foot, I'm like, this is exactly what I wanted. Now, the biggest thing that we need to talk about is the completely newly added functionality, which is called Chamber Builder. A couple years ago when we got Mario Maker originally, a lot of people started to just sort of wonder aloud, what would it be like to actually have a Zelda Maker? The ability to craft our own dungeons and play through them with friends and share them. And so it seems like Nintendo actually listened and fully implemented it in this game. Now, it's called the Chamber Builder system, and it works, but not quite the way I expected. Once you meet this character here after beating the first few dungeons, you finally have access to actually this special extra toolkit that allows you to not only craft these customized dungeons, but play through them. But as soon as you start constructing it, you immediately notice that this is just pulling already existing pieces. It's basically exact rooms that are already in the dungeons. You take them and copy and paste them here on this map. It allows you to basically make sort of stylized versions of dungeons, but you can't do as much as I might have hoped. So basically what it is there is a set amount of rules. Every door must have an exit, every stairway must have an up and a down, every dungeon requires a couple chests, the final chest will automatically give you the boss key, and it must have a boss that you can beat in order to beat it. Now that's all cool, and there's definitely the added bonus that you actually kind of have to do these. In order to get all the different collectibles like the heart pieces and maximum money, you need to do these dungeons. You need to do the pre-built ones that the character does, and then basically the ones that you yourself make. Now beyond this, what I noticed is that these rules certainly kind of make it where it feels very guided. Now one of the big detriments is, the reason I love Mario Maker so much is that your imagination is the limits. You can actually sort of remix ideas, like giving a bunch of fire flowers to a mushroom guy and making it where a Goomba can basically be a flame-breathing dragon. You can't do anything here except drop things you've already seen. It's nice, it's definitely interesting, and I'm gonna put some time into it, but it's not quite as much as I would have hoped. Now, separately from that, another really big issue, which is something I am a little bit disappointed in, is that you can't share these online. You can make the most crazy dungeon and spend hundreds of hours making the perfect little gauntlet for your buddies to play through, but the only way to share them is to upload them to an amiibo, go to somebody else's house who has The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening, and upload it down into their system. With that being said though, it's definitely not bad. I'm not going to act like this is a terrible idea or a poor implementation of it. I just really was craving a little bit more because I know that, well, basically Nintendo's not afraid to give us control. At this point, these game developers realize that their fan base are sometimes geniuses, able to craft incredibly just punishing levels that are so freaking interesting. So I wanted to see more out of it. Now the final thing I really want to talk about is actually the difficulty itself, because this game was definitely designed in the first place for like 8-year-olds. It was made for very, very small children because that was the primary demographic of the original Game Boy. That's why they had like little kids in the commercials and stuff. And so when you're playing through this, it actually has a lot of very simplified puzzles in it. I don't think that this is a bad thing. I just feel like it's very important to tell you that you're probably never really going to get lost. You're probably never going to be confused as to what to do. And even if you do, there are tons of hints in every single dungeon. In fact, they've actually added more hints in. So even if you're trying to do something like the trading side quest, which is mandatory, where you basically find things like you play a crane game and you get a Yoshi doll, and the Yoshi doll goes to this baby mama, and the baby mama gives you dog food, and the dog food goes and buys you bananas, and the bananas lets you bribe monkeys. Doing these little things, it used to just require trial and error. You had to just explore and try and figure things out completely on your own while looking at this really glorious map. And now it's sort of more hand-holdy. Overall, though, I have to say that this is still a great game. I know I'm kind of talking bad about it here and there, but it's because I have to nitpick a masterpiece. This game is still one of the very best Zeldas. It manages to be big and expansive and have a very, very messed up story when you actually look into it, and I love that about it. It manages to be exactly what it intends, and for that, I have to respect it. Do I wish that it had done a tiny bit more in the new features department when it comes to Chamber Builder? Yes, but that's basically just me wanting perfection to be even more perfect. Okay, so we've heard some good and some bad, but let's go over the ratings board and put a big number on it. I am giving The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening on Nintendo Switch a 9.5 out of 10. I'm very pleased about the fact that this came out the same day as the Switch Mini, because I really think that a lot of Game Boy fans and a lot of people who are just very into handheld-only gaming, this is the ultimate bite-sized adventure. You can play it, you can love it, you can get lost in it, but no matter what, you're definitely going to want to try and conquer every boss until you set free yourself from the windfish. Thanks so much for watching, gamers. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, share with your friends, and subscribe if you haven't already. But do me the biggest favor of all and keep dreaming. I'm going to have a video about the Switch Mini going up here in just a bit, by the way, so if you're watching this video as soon as I uploaded it, that'll be ready on the channel in like just a couple hours. So keep your eyes open for that. Love you! Thanks so much for watching that video. If you want to see something else, you can always click this link to see what I put up last, or, you know, subscribe and see what's coming up next. Also, I promise that whatever I do, it'll try not to suck.